The neon sign of the Silver Spoon Diner flickers, casting a rhythmic, sickly blue light over the cracked pavement. Inside, the air smells of old grease and cheap coffee. It's 30 a.m., the hour when the city's predators come out to hunt. In the far corner booth, a man sits alone. He wears a heavy, oversized coat, his face partially obscured by the steam rising from a bowl of noodles. He isn't scrolling on a phone. He isn't looking at the door. He is simply existing in the silence. Across the diner, 3 young men dressed in designer hoodies and tactical joggers exchange a look. To them, this isn't a human being, it's an easy score. They see an aging man, likely carrying a thick pension check, sitting in a vulnerable spot. They don't see the way his shoulders are squared, or the way his eyes track the reflection in the window. They see a victim. The leader, a kid with a jagged scar across his eyebrow, signals to the others. They slide out of their booth with practiced, predatory grace. They surround the corner table, cutting off every exit. The youngest one pulls a switchblade, the metallic click echoing against the quiet hum of the refrigerator. He leans in, the blade inches from the man's neck. Wallet. Watch everything. He sneers. The man doesn't flinch. He doesn't even stop chewing. He looks at the blade, then slowly shifts his gaze to the leader. His voice is a low, gravelly rumble that seems to vibrate the very table they are standing over. "You're breathing too loud," the man says calmly. "It's distracting. You're nervous. Your heart is hitting 110 beats per minute. That's a dangerous pace for someone who doesn't know who they're talking to." The punks laugh, but it's forced. The leader reaches for the man's collar, but in a blur of motion, the man's chopstick snaps shut. He catches a fly mid-air, inches from the leader's face. He places it down on a napkin unharmed and slowly reaches into his coat. He pulls out a weathered leather wallet and tosses it onto the table. "Take it," he says, returning to his noodles. "But remember, once you open that, your lives change forever." The punks grab the loot and bolt out the door, laughing about their easy win. They have no clue they didn't just rob a retiree. They just declared war on a ghost. The 3 punks scramble into their getaway car, a stolen sedan idling in the alleyway behind the diner. They are breathless, fueled by the toxic high of a successful heist. They hoot and holler, slapping the dashboard as they peel away into the rain, slick streets of the city. To them, the old man in the diner was just another Mark, a relic of a bygone era who was too slow and too scared to fight back. They pull over under the flickering amber glow of a street lamp 2 blocks away, eager to divide the spoils. The leader, the one with the scarred eyebrow, grabs the weathered leather wallet. Old man looked like he was worth a fortune. He grins, his fingers trembling with greed. He flips it open, expecting a thick stack of $100 bills or a platinum credit card. Instead, his smile falters. The wallet is empty of cash. There are no IDs, no receipts, no theater stubs. Instead, tucked into a silk-lined pocket, is a single heavy black coin. It's cool to the touch, engraved with a complex crest, a crown of thorns wrapped around a serpent's head. It is the consigliere coin of the Valenti crime family, an organization that the FBI claimed was dismantled in the mid-90s. Beneath the coin, tucked into a hidden flap, is a grainy, black and white photograph. In the photo, a much younger version of the man from the diner, Gino, stands in the center of a blood-soaked courtyard in Sicily. He is dressed in a sharp, charcoal suit, his hands resting calmly at his sides. Around him lie the bodies of 5 rival bosses, men who once ruled the Mediterranean with iron fists. In the photo, Gino isn't celebrating. He looks bored. He looks like a man who just finished a tedious chore. "What is this?" the youngest punk whispers, his bravado evaporating. "Who is this guy?" We cut back to Gino. He has finished his noodles. He pays the diner's owner with a crisp bill from a hidden pocket they missed, nods respectfully, and walks out into the night. He doesn't go to a penthouse or a fortress. He walks to a modest 2-story house in a quiet, working-class neighborhood. His life is one of forced simplicity. He spends his mornings at the local library, shelving books and helping children find reference materials. He feeds the neighborhood stray cats on his porch. He is a ghost living in plain sight, a man who traded a throne of bone for a life of silence. But the silence is an illusion. For years, Gino has stayed away from the world he built. He ignored the messages, the calls from desperate underbosses, and the reports of new gangs rising like weeds. He chose obscurity not because he was weak, but because he was tired of the blood. He came to this city unannounced, not to reclaim his power, but to see if the world had actually changed. He wanted to see how people treat a man they think is unimportant. And tonight, he got his answer. The air in Gino's small living room is heavy with the scent of chamomile and old paper. He moves with a slow, deliberate grace, his large hands cradling a delicate porcelain teapot. This is his sanctuary, a place where the violence of his past is supposed to be buried under layers of domestic peace. He is currently focused on his only hobby, ceramic pottery. On a small shelf near the window sit dozens of hand-crafted bowls and vases, each one a testament to the patience he has cultivated over decades of hiding. Suddenly, the front door doesn't just open, it explodes off its hinges. The three punks from the diner burst in, their faces twisted with a mix of wounded pride and desperate bravado. They aren't here for money anymore. They are here because they felt mocked by an empty wallet and a strange coin. They see Gino standing there in a faded cardigan, a teapot in his hand, and they mistake his stillness for paralysis. "You think you're funny, old man," the leader screams, kicking over a small wooden side table. "We found your little clubhouse photo. Who do you think you are, some kind of movie star? Some retired tough guy?" Gino doesn't say a word. He doesn't even set the teapot down. He simply watches them with eyes that have seen empires crumble. He is observing. He is measuring the distance between their feet, the way they grip their weapons, the lack of discipline in their movements. To them, he is a helpless senior citizen. To him, they are loud, untrained children playing with fire in a room full of gasoline. The youngest punk, seeking approval from his leader, reaches out and sweeps a row of Gino's hand-made ceramic pots off the shelf. The crash of breaking clay echoes through the house like a series of small gunshots. These weren't just objects. They were the physical manifestation of Gino's attempt at a peaceful soul. As the shards settle on the hardwood floor, the temperature in the room seems to drop 10 degrees. "Look at that," the punk sneers, stepping on a fragment of a blue, glazed vase. "Garbage. Just like you." They begin to systematically trash the room. They rip books from the shelves, slash the upholstery of the worn leather armchair, and throw the contents of the refrigerator onto the floor. One of them shoves Gino hard against the wall. Gino lets it happen. He absorbs the impact, his body limp, showing no resistance. He lets them laugh at his weakness. He lets them feel superior, watching as they revel in their perceived power over a man they think is too old to fight back. Behind the glass-paned door of his study, the punk spots something that catches their eye. A heavy, reinforced steel door at the end of a short hallway, tucked behind a velvet curtain. It looks out of place in this modest house, too thick, too industrial. "What's behind the door, Gino?" the leader asks, a cruel glint in his eye. "Is that where you keep the real gold? The mob stash?" He pulls a handgun from his waistband and presses the cold muzzle against Gino's temple. The disrespect has reached its peak. They aren't just robbing him anymore. They are desecrating the life he built to escape the monster he used to be. They think they've found a treasure chest. They have no idea they are standing at the gates of a tomb, and they are begging for the key. The air in the narrow hallway is suffocatingly thin. The cold, oily steel of the handgun's muzzle presses deeper into Gino's temple, the metal clicking rhythmically as the leader's hand tremors, with a mix of adrenaline and unearned power. The punks are breathing heavily, their eyes wide and dilated, fueled by the intoxicating delusion that they have finally cornered a legend. They expect a plea. They expect a whimper. They expect the smell of fear that usually accompanies a man staring down the barrel of a .45. Instead, they get a silence so profound it feels like the room has been plunged underwater. Gino's expression doesn't shift. His breathing remains slow, rhythmic, one breath every 6 seconds, a monk's pace. He looks at the heavy steel door, then slowly moves his eyes toward the leader. The old man, Fackhead, begins to crack, not from weakness, but from the shedding of a skin he has worn for 30 years. The slouch in his shoulders vanishes. His spine straightens with a series of audible pops, and suddenly, he seems to tower over them, filling the small hallway with a physical presence that feels like a mountain leaning against a blade of grass. "You want to see what's behind the door?" Gino asks. His voice isn't a whisper anymore. It's a low-frequency vibration that rattles the glass in the nearby picture frames. "You've spent the last hour breaking my home. You've spat on my floors. You've destroyed the only peace I've known in 3 decades. You're so desperate to find something valuable that you've forgotten to look at the man holding the key. Shut up and open it." The leader barks, though his voice cracks on the last syllable. He shoves Gino toward the keypad hidden behind a sliding wood panel. Gino reaches out. His fingers move with a dexterity that belays his age, fluid, precise, and hauntingly fast. He punches in a 12-digit code. There is a deep, hydraulic hum, followed by the heavy thud of 4 industrial deadbolts retracting simultaneously. The door doesn't just swing open, it glides on silent, pressurized hinges, revealing a room that looks like it belongs in the basement of the Pentagon, rather than a suburban house. The punks step inside, their mouths hanging open. They expected stacks of cash or bars of gold. Instead, they find a pristine, high-tech command center. One wall is a mosaic of flickering monitors, scrolling through global financial markets, encrypted satellite feeds, and live security footage from every corner of the city. Another wall holds a collection of suits, charcoal, black, and navy, each tailored to perfection, hanging like armor in a museum. But it's the third wall that stops their hearts. It's a vertical armory, but not of street weapons. These are specialized tools, silenced pistols, tactical knives with matte, black finishes, and strange, archaic Japanese weapons that look like they've seen centuries of use. In the center of the room sits a heavy mahogany desk. On it lies a single red rotary telephone, a direct line to a world these kids only see in nightmares. Suddenly, the red phone begins to ring. The sound is jarring, a piercing electronic chirp that echoes off the reinforced concrete walls. The punks freeze. The leader's gun hand drops an inch. He looks at the caller ID display next to the phone. It doesn't show a number. It shows a single title, Teach Prime Minister. Gino walks to the desk. He doesn't ask permission. He doesn't look at the gun still pointed vaguely in his direction. He picks up the receiver. "I told you never to call this house," Gino says into the mouthpiece, his voice devoid of emotion. He listens for a moment, then glances at the three punks. "No, I'm not alone. I have 3 guests. They're currently debating whether they want to finish their lives as statistics or as lessons." He hangs up and turns to face them. The transformation is complete. The cardigan he wears now looks like a coronation robe. The eyes that were once gentle are now as cold and unforgiving as a Sicilian winter. The punks finally understand the truth that has been staring them in the face since the diner. Gino wasn't hiding from the law. The law was the one paying him to stay retired, terrified of what would happen if the most efficient problem solver in history ever decided to go back to work. The door is open. Gino says, his hands resting lightly on the desk. "But you're not leaving with gold. You're leaving with the realization that you just tried to rob the man who taught the world how to steal." The heavy silence of the vault, like command center, is broken only by the low, rhythmic hum of cooling fans and the digital chirping of encrypted data streams. The 3 punks stand frozen, their boots resting on a floor that costs more than their stolen getaway car. The leader's hand, still clutching the handgun, is shaking visibly now. The weight of the weapon feels different. It no longer feels like power, it feels like a liability. He looks at the wall of monitors, then at the man he thought was a helpless retiree, and finally at the red phone that had just connected to a world leader. Who are you?" The youngest one whispers, his voice cracking. The bravado he displayed while smashing ceramic pots in the living room has completely vanished, replaced by a hollow, sinking dread in his gut. Gino doesn't answer immediately. He walks slowly toward a side console and taps a sequence on a glass touchscreen. One of the larger monitors flickers to life, displaying a grainy surveillance feed of a high-end corporate boardroom downtown. We see a group of men in bespoke suits sitting around a mahogany table, sipping 20-year-old scotch. In the center of the group is a man in his early 30s with slicked back hair and a cruel, symmetrical face. "Recognize him?" Gino asks, his voice like grinding stones. The leader of the punks pales.
That's Mr. Vane."
He's the one who gave us the address. He said you were a squatter, holding up a redevelopment project. He said if we scared you out, we'd get 10 grand each and a spot in his crew." Gino lets out a short, mirthless huff of air. "Mr. Vane. Or as I knew him, Julian. I watched that boy grow up. I sat at his father's funeral 20 years ago and promised I would never raise a hand against his bloodline. His father was a man of honor, a soldier who understood that power is a burden, not a toy. But Julian is a vulture. He doesn't want to build, he wants to consume." Gino taps the screen again. A series of legal documents, bank transfers, and property deeds scroll by at blinding speed. "You weren't sent here to rob an old man. You were sent here to be executed." Julian knew exactly who I was. He knew that if 3 street thugs broke into my home and started destroying my peace, I would have no choice but to react. He was counting on me killing you. He wanted to see if the ghost of Sicily was still haunted by his own shadows. He wanted to verify my reflexes before he moved forward with his real plan. The punks exchanged terrified glances. The realization hits them like a physical blow. They weren't the hunters. They were the bait. They were disposable pawns in a chess game played by a man who viewed their lives as less than the ink on a contract. "The redevelopment project he mentioned." Gino continues, his eyes narrowing as he watches the screen. "It's a front for a massive land grab. He's clearing out this entire neighborhood, families, small businesses, people who have lived here for generations, to build a private port for unregistered cargo. He's selling this city out to the highest bidder, and he thought he could use me as a litmus test for his own security. The bigger truth. starts to settle in the room like toxic dust. This wasn't just about a wallet in a diner or a few broken pots. It was a calculated betrayal of a decades-old truce. Gino had stayed in the shadows to keep the peace, to ensure that the violence of his generation died with him. But Julian Vane had mistaken Gino's silence for senility. He had mistaken his mercy for a lack of teeth. He sent you here to die just to see how I'd do it. Gino says, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly soft register. He didn't care if you succeeded. He didn't care if you failed. To him, you are nothing but data points. If I killed you, he'd know I was still dangerous. If you killed me, he'd have the neighborhood to himself. Either way, he wins. Gino looks at the leader, whose gun is now pointing at the floor. The safety catch audibly click back into place. So, I have a question for you three. You came here seeking a payday from a man who views you as trash to be burned. You stood in my home and spat on the life I chose. Now that you know the man you're working for would have walked over your corpses to sign a merger. Do you still feel like tough guys? The silence that follows is heavy with the weight of shifted loyalties. The punks are no longer looking at Gino as a target, but as the only person in the world who is actually telling them the truth. The conspiracy is laid bare, a corporate takeover fueled by mob-style tactics, with Gino, the retired Godfather, standing as the only obstacle in the way of a city's destruction. Should people like Julian be forgiven? Gino asks, though it's clear he already knows the answer. He's betrayed the old laws. He's betrayed his own father's memory. And most importantly, he brought his noise into my house. The tension in the basement command center reaches a breaking point, as the sound of heavy tires crunching on gravel echoes from the driveway above. Gino's security monitors flicker, showing 3 black SUVs pulling up to the house. A dozen men in tactical gear, armed with submachine guns, spill out. This is the cleanup crew Julian Vane sent to finish what the punk started. Gino looks at the 3 terrified young men standing before him. The leader's hand is no longer on his gun, it's trembling at his side. The old man, Slutch, is gone, replaced by the terrifyingly efficient posture of a predator. I didn't come to this neighborhood to be recognized or feared, Gino says, his voice vibrating with a cold metallic edge. I came to see if there was a world left worth saving. I came to see how you treat people you think have no power. He pauses, his eyes locking onto the leader. You failed that test, but Julian Vane, he failed a much older law. Gino reaches into a drawer and pulls out a pair of weighted tactical gloves, pulling them on slowly. You have one chance. Get in the corner. Stay low and watch. You're about to see the difference between a bully with a gun and a master of the craft. The front door upstairs is kicked open. The hit squad enters with clinical precision, but they are walking into a house owned by a man who knows every floorboard's creak. Gino moves. He doesn't run, he flows. He vanishes into the shadows of the hallway like smoke. What follows is a masterclass in Aikido and tactical dominance. Gino uses the attacker's own momentum against them. He doesn't use a firearm, he uses the environment. A door frame becomes a lever. A shattered ceramic shard becomes a tool. In a blur of motion, he dismantles the first 3 men, his movements so fast the punks can barely track them on the monitors. He is a whirlwind of controlled violence, neutralizing the squad not with anger, but with the cold, calculated efficiency of a man who has done this 1,000 times. Within 3 minutes, the house is silent again. The cleanup crew is incapacitated on the floor. Gino stands in the center of the wreckage, not a single breath out of sync. He turns to the punks. The life you were chasing just tried to kill you. The man you thought was weak just saved you. If you believe respect matters more than status, hit that like button right now. The morning sun begins to bleed through the shattered windows of the living room, casting long, golden streaks across the debris. The air, once thick with the smell of gunpowder and adrenaline, is now eerily still. The hit squad has been neutralized, handed over to a cleanup crew of a very different kind, men who answer only to the black coin Gino carries. The 3 punks emerge from the basement, their faces pale and their eyes wide with a newfound sobriety. They look at the wreckage of the house, then at the man standing in the center of it. Gino is no longer wearing the tactical gloves. He is back in his faded cardigan, holding a broom, beginning to sweep up the shards of his broken pottery. He looks tired, not from the fight, but from the necessity of it. Your debt to Julian Vane is cancelled, Gino says without looking up. And your debt to me, that's something you'll have to pay back by living lives that don't involve breaking into the homes of old men. The leader of the group steps forward. He doesn't reach for a weapon or a snide comment. Instead, he reaches down and picks up a large fragment of a blue, glazed vase, the first one he had smashed. He looks at it for a long time before placing it gently on the table. Why didn't you kill us? The leader asks, his voice barely a whisper. In the diner, in the hallway you had a dozen chances. Gino stops sweeping. He looks at them with a gaze that is no longer cold but deeply human. Because real character isn't shown in how you treat your equals. It's shown in how you treat people you think have no power. You thought I was a victim, so you were cruel. Julian thought you were pawns, so he was murderous. I chose to see you as a mistake that could be corrected. He gestures to the neighborhood outside, where the city is slowly waking up. This company, this world, is full of people who judge others by their clothes, their titles, or their age. Arrogance always reveals itself eventually. It makes you loud, it makes you sloppy, and it makes you blind. I was ignored because others were arrogant. I survived because I was humble enough to stay in the shadows. The punks leave quietly, walking out into a world that looks exactly the same as it did yesterday, yet feels entirely different to them. They carry with them a lesson that no street corner or gang could ever teach, that the most dangerous man in the world isn't the one screaming for respect, but the one who doesn't need it to know who he is. Gino watches them go. He knows the ghost of Sicily might have to walk the earth a little longer to ensure Julian Vane's corporate empire is dismantled piece by piece, but for today, the peace is restored. He returns to his tea, a solitary figure in a quiet house, guarding a city that has no idea he exists. We have more legendary stories and high-stakes deep dives coming your way soon. Comment below and let us know which part of the reveal was your favorite, so we can keep improving for you.